When is the right time to stretch a pair of shoes? How do you know if you should stretch the shoe or just kind of cut your losses and move on to the next? I want to address those questions right now, and then I'm going to get into my preferred process for how to stretch a pair of leather dress shoes. Let's start with that. If your shoe is brand new, whether it's extra snug or just borderline snug, do not stretch it. If you're stretching a brand new pair of shoes and it's already too snug and you can't wear it unless you stretch it, it's kind of hopeless and you should just move on. If it's borderline and it's wearable, what you should do is break the shoe in and then stretch it, because once you stretch it, you can't undo that. Now that you've decided that you do need to stretch your pair of shoes, what is the right method? Well, there's three main methods I'll talk about here. The first is the brute force approach. This is kind of the approach that like a cobbler would take, or you would take with one of those big wooden shoe stretchers. The next is using a larger lasted shoe tree to use a brute force approach, but with a little more finesse. The third approach is more of a targeted pinpoint stretching approach, and that is my preferred method. And I'll talk about why I don't prefer those others after the first few steps of how we do this. Before I get into that process, a few words of caution. Always go slow and err on the side of being cautious. You want to make sure that you're very confident in knowing exactly where and how much the leather needs to stretch. Make sure that you're starting with a clean leather shoe. You don't want to have any dirt or grime or buildup on the surface of the upper. It's just going to make it more difficult to kind of gauge the quality of the leather and the condition of the leather as you're going through this stretching process. You want to make sure that you're caring for that leather throughout the process, so not only does it fit when you're done, but it's still in its top condition when you're done stretching it. Lastly, the adage of like measure twice, cut once definitely applies here. The shoe, once you go down that road, there's no turning back, so you want to be very sure and very confident in what actions you're about to take. This is going to be what I call like the pinpoint targeted stretch approach. The reason that this is my favorite is because I find that this is the most kind of purest stretching approach to what a shoemaker would do if they're making a modification to a last. They're doing a very, very targeted and a very accurate modification to an existing shoe or an existing last to account for a fitting issue that one of their clients have. But this is the my personal favorite approach, because all those others have some negatives associated with them. I'll touch on those very shortly. One thing to keep in mind is that in order to be able to do this, you do need to be very familiar with what your foot needs. You need to understand like where the pain points are within your feet and how to manipulate a shoe or the upper of a shoe to accommodate those fitting needs. It's very common to kind of have a misconception that like, oh, well, if it's the width, then I need to stretch it, side to side. It's not always the case. There are three-dimensional shapes that we're talking about here, and because of that, you need to understand there's going to be consequences of you stretching one area to other areas. Finally, let's take a look at the shoes here. So these are Antonio Mecariello. This is a made-to-order pair of Valerius penny loafers in peccary, and I absolutely love the shoe. The fit is a stock hawksbill last. I should have gone with a made-to-measure or just a modified last, but another story for another day. Now, I've already worn these like a full season, and they broke in. They're comfortable, but it's painful to wear them across the strap, like on the instep of my feet. Now, what I've done here is I'm using these like plastic cards that I've cut myself. They're very thin pieces of plastic, and in doing so, this allows me to make very incremental progress in stretching the leather, but also I can very easily add or subtract how much I want to stretch it. Now, this is just a piece of like plastic sheet board that I got off Amazon. Very cheap, but works perfectly for this application. Now that I've kind of showed you how the fit looked beforehand, and kind of walked you through a very quick process of me just kind of cleaning these off and conditioning them, as well as inserting these for the first time, we're going to let that settle, and I'm going to talk about the brute force approach as well as the larger shoe tree approach. Now, the main reason I don't like the brute force approach, it's kind of self-explanatory in the name. Create more room, create space everywhere. And it does it at the expense of, the support that you're going to get from the shoe, the last shape, and just the overall like elegance and refinement of some higher end shoes. Like this one in particular, it would be very hard to take that approach with this shoe without very much altering the way that this thing looks. It's very possible that the brute force approach works. It creates more room. You kind of feel relief in the area that was too snug. It's also, relieved any of the support that you were getting in the areas that did fit well. So it may have solved one area while it's compounded and worsened another area. Now, the larger shoe tree approach is much like this, but almost on the opposite end of the spectrum, where it requires a very accurate, fully elasted shoe tree to make any progress whatsoever. If you have that and you're able to insert it in, great. The problem then becomes you're going to make very minimal progress over a very long period of time. So the amount of effort that you're going to put in trying to stretch a shoe using a larger shoe tree, the results are going to be very slow, almost unnoticeable, and just generally speaking, it very rarely solves the problem of it fits everywhere except like one or two areas. This is generally creating a stretch over the entire shoe as opposed to one or two specific parts. That's normally where and why I'm stretching a shoe. So because of that, the larger lasted shoe tree, that just doesn't necessarily solve the issues that I'm trying to solve. Getting back to my specific pair here as I stretch them, there's obviously a few questions that I need to answer for you as far as like, did it work? Did it not? Did I learn anything? And what am I going to do now? The quick answer is yes, it worked. The longer answer is much more complicated. Let me explain. So this did work very well. If we're looking at the shoe and trying to answer the question, is the shoe larger across the instep than it was when I started? Yes. Is it as painful to wear? No. Am I able to wear it now for a full day without keeling over in stress and pain? Yes, I can. So where's the complexity of this answer? And it's that it hasn't really made it very comfortable. It's made it comfortable enough to get by. And when we're talking about all the shoes that I have back there and whether or not it's going to be enough to kind of allow me to want to keep this in my rotation and actually enjoy wearing it, it's going to need to get stretched more. Now what do I do? Here's the complex part. So it's kind of making that decision, like, do I just kind of cut ties, cut my losses and move on? Or did I get enough encouragement by the progress that I made so far that I'm going to continue? The answer is yes. I think I made very good progress for the amount of time and effort that I put into these, which honestly hasn't been that much. Like, you've seen the videos, you've seen like, the other clips of me actually stretching this, and it wasn't that much time, maybe a half an hour total. So I'm going to keep going at it. I've got extra cuts of plastic board right here, and I already put 2 additional plastic boards in each shoe. And I feel like if I continue to repeat this, wear them maybe like once a week, combined with trying to get as many of these in there as possible, I think within a month's time, maybe like a half an hour a week, I can make it happen. What questions do you have, or what experiences do you have with stretching your own shoes or having somebody stretch a pair of shoes for you? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and I will definitely keep you posted about how these are progressing. If you guys want to see some other videos where I've stretched different pairs of shoes, check out this one. If you want to see the unboxing of this specific shoe, check out this video here. Thanks.